Midweek Lift, we're in Matthew 5 this week, and I am actually the person who wrote the words of grace for this week. So I wrote that on the first part, which is the Beatitudes, and I hope you enjoy it. But I want to talk about the second part of the chapter where Jesus starts preaching in what we call the Sermon on the Mount. There's something interesting that Jesus said here. In verse 20, he says, I tell you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the scribes and Pharisees, you'll not enter the kingdom of heaven. So that's kind of a tall order, right? We've got to be more righteous than the scribes and Pharisees. Later, he starts doing this technique where he says, you've heard it said, but I say. And so here's an example. You've heard it said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy, but I say, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. So first he says, you have to have a righteousness that exceeds the scribes and Pharisees. And then he says, well, this is what the scribes and Pharisees say, because that's kind of the teaching techniques that the rabbis used. Here's what you've heard other people say. They say, love your neighbor and hate your enemies. You got to be more righteous than that. You need to love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. So Jesus takes it up a notch. But then he drops the killer bomb on us at the very end of the chapter. He says, therefore, you're perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. And it's like, perfect? Jesus, I can't do perfect. I'm a human. I'm a person, right? Well, that word perfect has a coloring and a flavoring of the word complete, of completion. And we think of perfect in America as being like, idealized, but it really means full and complete in a lot of ways. And so I think what Jesus is saying here is, if you just say, I'm just going to do what is expected of me and no more, that's really not what I'm asking. I want you to do what the Father does. If you want a complete faith, you need to do better than that. The beautiful thing is that throughout this whole thing, Jesus has just built this platform of the Beatitudes in which he says, hey, you know what? You're going to mess up. You're going to fail. You're going to struggle. You're going to suffer. And there's a blessing in that. Jesus is not holding up some high bar saying, if you don't do this, you're going to hell. In fact, he doesn't even use that language. He says those who don't do this are least in the kingdom. But he says there's something better. There's something more. You can level up. You can go higher. There's a whole new reality you can get to if you'll raise your eyes above the ground and above the life that you're looking at. You can live on a higher plane, and you can have a complete faith. And so that's my prayer. My prayer is, give me a complete faith. I don't want to just struggle with the same mundane old things. I want a faith that sees beyond those to what God is actively doing in the world around me. I want to be the guy that loves my neighbor and my enemy and prays for those who persecutes me, because I know that there's a greater battle. There's more at stake. So, God, that's our prayer. Get our eyes off the ground. Let us see how to be perfect as you are perfect.